Hello everybody. Today I'm back to working on my 1943 Gravely Model L garden tractor. This is a machine that I restored last year, and after I was done, and I use that term loosely, with the restoration process, I noticed that there were a couple issues I still needed to address that hadn't caught my attention. One of them being the right side axle seal was leaking. Now I had replaced the left side axle seals early on in the restoration, hadn't noticed that the right side was going to leak. So I had set, over the winter, I'd set this little dish underneath that right side to catch the oil in it. And you can see it over the last few months, it's dripped out maybe about a third of a cup of oil. Nothing too significant, but enough that it does need to get done. So that's what I'm going to do today. We're going to go ahead and replace those axle seals, and I'll show you what that process looks like. All right, we've got the oil drained out. We've got the tractor lifted up in the air so the wheel's off the ground. The next thing I'm going to need to do is I need to deflate this tire, because these are old style hubs where all 6 of these bolts thread into the hub itself, as opposed to every other one having a nut on the backside, which is going to hold the split rim together. So if I don't deflate this tire and I try to take this wheel off this hub with the pressure in it, it's going to pop this whole thing apart. I really don't want to do that. So the easiest way I've found is just to take the valve stem out. That way it gets all the pressure out of the tire, and you don't have to sit there and just hold that valve down. It's really the easiest way I've found to do it. It only takes a few seconds to get the air out. Now, just a tip, it's easier if you break these bolts loose before you lift the tractor up in the air, because otherwise this thing's freewheeling and it gets hard to pop those loose, just like taking a tire off a car. So I've already got these popped loose, or broken loose. So I'll just use my speed handle, and we'll take the little lug bolts off here, take the wheel off. See, if you try to take this off with pressure, again, this is a split rim with a tube on the inside. What's going to happen is going to pop those two sides apart, and the tube's going to try to shoot out between them. Then you're going to have to deflate it, reset everything, because you put this together with the tube pinched in between them, it's not going to hold any air. It's going to go flat right away on you. So it's easier just to deflate it to start out with. You're going to have to do it anyway. Okay, wheels off. Next step is we're going to have to take this hub off. So in order to do that, first thing you got to do is get this hubcap off. Easiest way to do that, if they're old, take a MAP gas torch and just heat them, honestly, until they start smoking. Then put a little pry bar behind it and pop them out. These might come out without some heat, just because I redid this tractor not long ago. So I may be able to get away with that. Let's see if I can get that lucky. Yep, this is going to work. Once you get these things off, it's always a smart idea if you clean everything up, put a little bit of anti-seize in there. Because these things, it's really easy to get water in behind them and have them rust out, and then they are a giant pain to get off of here without destroying them. Just go easy, take your time. And they'll come right off. There. So now we've got the hub off. We have to go ahead, pull this pin, and take this castle nut off of here. Okay, the easiest way to get this thing out of here is honestly to use an impact. If you don't have an impact, this is kind of tricky to break this bolt loose while this hub's still able to turn. You got to kind of block the other wheel off and throw it in gear. So it's a 5 or 15/16 socket. And with an impact, just comes off nice and easy. The first time you pull your hubs off, it may not be that nice to you. So now I got to pull this hub. I've had this hub on and off a couple times. I put anti-seize on it. So I should be able to get this hub off relatively easy. Just going to use a puller. And you don't need an impact for this. It's easier if you have one. Just a word of caution. Be careful doing this. If they're really stuck and seized on there and you don't apply heat, which you may have to, you can end up breaking these hubs. You know, these original ones, I mean, you can find them, but it's nice not to destroy them. Okay, so swap out our sockets. And hopefully this should come off pretty easy for me. Yep. That's a good thing about putting anti-seize on. And now that we've got the hub off, you can see the oil seal is in this little retainer right here. So we have to take these 4 bolts off, and then we're going to pop this little retainer right off so we can get the seal out. We're just going to set these bolts down right where I can get to them. And you can also see this oil right here that's pooling up, that's been leaking out of that seal. So we got this cap loose. Now, if you're pulling this off an older machine, it may require a little bit of persuasion, but be careful. There's shims in behind here. The reason those shims are there is because it sets the play on your axle. So how many ever shims are on there, put the same shims back in when you put it back together. They don't necessarily have to go on in the same order, but they do all have to be there. Okay, now that we got this cap off of here, you need to press this seal out. And if you don't have a press, don't worry. All you need to do is get some pieces of wood or something underneath this lip to hold it up off the ground. I could use a couple pieces of metal or something like that. And then take a socket that's as close to the outer diameter of that seal as you can get, and just use a hammer and lightly tap it and drive that seal out nice and careful. I do have a press, so I'm going to go ahead and use it for this. Okay, we've got our little plate set on the press. Going to set our retainer in place here. Put our socket over the seal, and we're just going to really slowly press that seal right out the back side. Nothing to it. Now that we have our axle seal out, it's important to note that the original ones were these wide seals that had 2 lips on the inside. From what I understand, you can still buy seals like this, but they're extremely expensive. So when you order axle seals, what you get instead are 2 single-lipped seals that will stack up, and you'll see that shortly, to take the place of this one double seal. Now, a word of caution, the earlier Model Ls, the outer diameter on these were 1 5/8 inches. The later Model Ls were 1.5 inches. The inner diameter is the same. The axle never changed. Just for some reason, they changed the casting and they went to a smaller outer diameter seal. So it's always good to know which ones you're looking for before you spend your money. But if you've got an old Model L and you're looking for the larger axle seals, here are your part numbers for National Oil Seals and for Timken. So you can just go ahead and order those numbers direct. And just remember, you're going to need 2 of them for a set. because you need two to take the place of one of the original seals. Okay, now we're going to put the new seals in from the same side that we pressed the old seals out. Just because I want to press on this outer edge, I don't want to press on this inside. That'll mess everything up. So a word of caution, there may be a little lip on the inside of this retainer, just from rust and stuff like that over the years. So take a scraper or something, clean that lip off, because we're going to be pushing the seal in past that, and if there's a lip there, that's going to be a problem. So we're just going to set them in nice and easy. And again, if you don't have a press, you could just tap them in with a hammer. I have a press, so I figure I'm just going to go ahead and use it. And now we're going to press the first seal in. And we're going to press this seal in a little, just not all the way in, just a little bit. So the top of the seal is recessed inside that retainer. Now we're going to set the second seal on top of that. Put our socket in place. And we're going to press it in until the top of this seal is flush with our retainer. That's as far as we need to go. Just take it nice and slow. And that should be it. Let's take a look and see. It could go down just a little bit more, I think. And that's good. Our new seals are in place. Next thing you need to do, and I don't need to do it on this one because this is all cleaned up, but especially on an older machine that hasn't been worked on yet, you've probably got a fair amount of rust and stuff like that on this axle. You want to clean any of that off, just so, there's nothing abrasive that's going to work against your seal. I'm going to clean all of this off too. Sometimes this can be a bit of a pain. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to put some oil on our axle so we can slide that seal in there without messing it up. And sometimes it's easier just to put your shims on your little retainer. We're going to slide this into place. Use a bolt in here to get the shim and the retainers lined, or the shims and the retainer lined up right. Now we should be able to tighten this back up. Just kind of back and forth pattern them. Make sure it goes in nice and straight, nothing gets bound up on you. Just kind of like torquing down anything else. Just work it back and forth. I'm sure there's a torque spec on this. I'm also sure I don't know what it is. So you don't want to over tighten it. There's no need to do that. And these are probably old bolts in an old housing. And if you get too crazy on it, you can probably strip it out. All right, so our new seal's in place. We've got our shim in, so there's no play on the axle. Next thing we're going to need to do, go ahead and reinstall our hub. And I always want to use some anti-seize on these hubs, because otherwise when you go to take these off at some point, they can be a real pain. So you don't have to slather it on there. Just get a little bit just enough that this will come back off easy if you need it to. Our, our keyway, our key stayed in the hub, but you got to make sure that key is in there when you put these back on. Otherwise, your hubs are just going to spin. And these are taper fits, so you slide it in. Take your castle nut. We're going to put the castle nut on there. Now, one thing I want to point out, you probably noticed this when we took the pin out. There's a hole right here that the cotter pin goes through. And that hole's got to line up with an opening in the castle nut. So we're going to tighten this up. And we're going to, again, you don't need an impact for this. I use an impact just because it's easier, but if you use an impact, it's very easy to over tighten these things and make a total mess out of trying to get them off next time. If you want to know where that hole is that your pin goes through, I usually just try to get it right on the top. And you want to make sure that this gets seated in well. If it doesn't and your hubs are loose, you're going to mess everything up. And we're just going to tap it until we can get a pin in through that hole. There we go. That should be tight enough. And we're going to slide our cotter pin back in, bend the end of it to retain it. Now we need to tap our hubcaps back on. And yes, I'm going to use just a little bit of anti-seize in here too. So if I have to get these off, I don't have to take a torch to do it. And hey, the good thing is the anti-seize is silver and so is my paint. So I get a little bit on the outside, it's not going to show up. We're going to take a rubber mallet and just a cloth so I don't mar these things. Tap it nice and straight. There you go. Axle seals on, hubs on. Next thing we need to do is put our wheel back on. And of course, since we took the air out of this, we don't have to reset our tube or anything. We should be able to very simply set the wheel on the hub and put the bolts in, bolt it on. And you don't have to tighten these down, tight when you put them on, because again, this is going to end up on the ground, and you can just tighten them back up when it's on the ground, just like when you're changing a tire on a car. You snug them up, you put it back on the ground, and then you tighten your lug nuts. You can do the same thing here. Snug enough. And we're going to put the valve stem back in. Then we'll need to put some air in that tire, obviously. Thankfully, I still have some air in my compressor, so this will be easy enough. These don't take a whole lot of air. I usually put about 10 to 15 pounds in these. All right. That's all there is to it. Now that we've got the machine back on the ground, the only thing left to do is put the oil back in it, and we're all done. Thank you again for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you on another episode.